friend here, exploring music through Prince. That's my normal tagline here. Um, this is going to be a much harder video, I think, to do. You know me. You guys know me. I go out of my way a lot of the time in order to keep things, really kind of positive. And we don't want too much negativity around here. But I felt that it was important for me to come and kind of speak about a lot of the things that are happening right now. And it's stuff that I've always been aware of, obviously. Growing up Black, it's really hard to not be aware of the things that are going on. But I've mostly just been, I've been consumed by, all of the news and everything that's been going on. Friday was a really hard day for me because if anybody follows me on Facebook, I wasn't that active on Twitter that day, but if anybody follows me on Facebook, I was very, very angry to the point where I could not really put into words how I was feeling. So what I did is I shared the posts from, other people that I thought were possibly using better language than I could have at the time. It's weird as a writer, you think that I would always have the right words to say, but I really sometimes don't, especially when something hits so close to home. It kind of consumes you and makes you not be able to be, coherent. And of course, I even posted, jokingly on my Facebook that, my son wouldn't take a nap. So there was no way I was going to actually be able to go live. But today, as you can see, I'm in my room. I'm in my bedroom because I still couldn't get time at my actual, desk. So I kind of had to come and lock myself in my bedroom in order to come and do this live stream. So what is this live stream about, I guess, is the main question. If you see the title of the video is "The Protests Aren't Just About George Floyd." So here's where I'm at. Okay, so Friday was when overnight the protesters had gotten to the point where they had burned down the 3rd precinct in Minneapolis. And they had burned down a Target and a Walgreens and a Domino's. Now, why do I know this? Here's why. Because that's what the news is about. The news at that point had almost stopped being about what caused the protest and about the protest itself, casting aspersion and casting blame on the protesters for being angry about not getting justice, right? So that's where my anger started, because I woke up to everybody saying the rioters and the looters, they're the worst thing ever and they should just stop. And I'm like, but if you're mad about the fact that people are burning down a Target, but you're not mad that the police are killing unarmed people, almost targeting the Black community, then yeah, there's something wrong with you, essentially. There's definitely something wrong with you if you are more angry about that than the death of people. It's just kind of bonkers that that's what people want to focus on. And here's the thing. There was 4 days until it got to that point. The first day, the protest, everybody said, you know what, thoughts and prayers. The second day, people were like, oh, well, I guess that maybe they should do something. Third day, I almost heard nothing about it the third day. I only heard that protests were going on. The fourth day, after they burned down a Target, people are like, oh, they're pearl clutching. Oh, my dear Lord, they burned down a Target? It's like, so it took this for people to pay attention So here is a quote, and it's one that's been going around a lot. So here it is. It's Martin Luther King, and it's, "I must say tonight that a riot is the language of the unheard. And what is it America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the promise of freedom and justice have not been met, and it has failed to hear that large segments of white society are more concerned with tranquility and the status quo than about justice and humanity." And that's a very strong quote, and it even misses a piece of it, right? Because a lot of people are making the argument of like, well, but why are we going to burn down our own neighborhood, right? Like that's what people are saying. A lot of people are saying. I'm not going to say everybody's saying it, but a lot of people are saying, why are they burning down their own things? And even Martin Luther King says it's self-defeating and it's the worst thing to do. However, it is the only language that can be heard sometimes. So it's, I think that that's kind of where we're at this point, is no one was listening until we burned down a Target. And a whole lot of people are saying that businesses and homes are being looted and robbed. So, I have not seen any evidence of homes being hurt in any way. They are, what I have noticed is that they are targeting malls, they are targeting corporate buildings, they are targeting police buildings, government buildings. There's a couple of small businesses that are kind of getting thrown in the mix just because they're kind of there. And that part of that sucks. But the larger scheme of it all is that this is what it takes in order to get justice. Now, let me make sure I did make myself some notes. I wanted to make sure I try to hit everything, and it's an emotional day, so I definitely wanted to make sure that I just checked my notes. So I want to say one more thing real quick, and I have one more quote to share, and it's from a guy on Twitter. I don't even know who he is, but it's a perfect quote. and I posted this on my Facebook as well and shared it on my Twitter. Stop using the term riot to describe the current actions in Minneapolis, or Minnesota, really. These are rebellions. This isn't random. It's not irrational. It's an organized resistance to an evil system that only pays attention when it feels financially or physically unsafe. And this is how we being Black people, feel every day. So that is, I thought it was a pretty powerful quote. And I think it kind of piggybacks on top of what, Martin Luther King said. I'm not equating the two, but I feel like, these are powerful things that I think everybody needs to hear, which is, I have several YouTube channels. At this point, this was the one that I wanted to speak about. I wanted to speak about it on this channel, largely because this is, one thing is because this is my largest audience, and I feel like this is where I can get to the most people. But secondly, it started in Minneapolis, right? It started in the place that if you look at the calendar, we were all supposed to be there. I got a notification today reminding me that it's time to check in for my plane trip to Celebration that was supposed to be this coming week. And like, that's scary. That's scary, right? But guess what's even scarier? I woke up this morning and I saw that there are riots happening here, not more than 5-10 minutes from my house. There's also protesting and everything happening here. And those protests have also erupted into things. There's also protests in New York. There's also protests in Columbus. There's also protests in Los Angeles. These, and the reason that I titled this video, the protests aren't just about George Floyd. George Floyd is a catalyst. He's the thing that, his death being so blatant, so in your face, so obvious that this was a lack of justice, all it did was it set the fire going. The people here in Florida, in Tampa, yes, they're partially protesting the death of George Floyd, but they're also protesting the police abuse that we have here. Los Angeles is rife with police abuse. New York, the same. Like, this isn't a new thing. We had a whole ton of these cases pop up. I think it was 2 years ago, maybe. And we had a large societal conversation about what needed to be done. And what needed to be done was body cams and more accountability. And, you know, they made a few cops here and there pay for their mistakes. And that seemed to placate a lot of society, even though it still continued under the radar. The news stopped covering it as much. And, you know, and I will say that there's actually a lot of precincts around the country that actually did make those steps to do better, right? So it does exist. I'm not saying it's bad everywhere, but it is also kind of bad everywhere. But in Minneapolis, where there's already such a race disparity, I know that all of us and, you know, the Purple family, we all kind of look at Minneapolis as this kind of like holy Mecca because that's where Prince lived. But, you know, Prince came from, you know, an area where it was mostly black and it was not affluent and it was poor. And then, of course, there's, you know, the racial disparity in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area has always been bad. So, honestly, if you look at it, I mean, no city is safe from this, right? I think that that's a big thing to kind of, you know, because I know that we romanticize the city, but no city is safe. No city is immune to this sort of outcome if the people are mistreated and abused and oppressed. Okay, like they're as much as we love Minneapolis, it has been the home to some really horrible injustices, and George Floyd is just the tip of the iceberg. But he's, you know, the largest kind of large profile, you know, right now, you know, but just think about it. 2 or 3 days ago, there was the guy walking through Central Park in New York and saw the white woman who didn't have a leash on her dog. And she's like, if you don't leave me alone, I'm going to call the cops and tell them a black man is threatening me. And if he hadn't recorded that, all they would have had is her voicemail, her 911 message of her crying and screaming in fear, when all the guy wanted her to do was put a leash on her dog. And that's the level of racism that, you know, that's really blatant racism, you know, and so is the death of George Floyd. But there's so many other like instances that just happen every day and we just don't hear about it because the news doesn't feel like that's worth it. And the big thing for me is like, everybody's like, oh, there's protests in Tampa about George Floyd and in New York about George Floyd. And like, you think that they don't have their own issues? You think it's all about this one guy? The whole nation is mad about this one guy? No, there's injustices everywhere. There's injustices everywhere. Okay. And when I was really like at my angriest, he hadn't been arrested yet, the main guy. But you know what? There were 4 cops there. And really, one of them needed to be arrested definitely because he was the one with his knee on George Floyd's neck. The other 3, though, stood there and watched as it happened and protected their friend and didn't act and didn't try to change anything. And they allowed it to happen, which makes them culpable as well. I mean, that's just the law, you know? Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, in all of this, again, you know, I know that some people might be thinking, well, I mean, obviously he was a threat to the police and he was a gangbanger and he must have had a weapon on him and all that stuff. No, they ran him down because he wrote a bad check. That's what he was being arrested for, was for writing a bad check. He had to have his arms, you know, tied behind him and, you know, handcuffed. He had to be slammed to the ground and had to have a knee put on his neck because of a bad check. That's not how you, if he was violent, if he was resisting, and I actually did hear, you know, some reports that he was resisting, but he was probably resisting because he didn't want something like that to happen. And then it just makes it happen anyway. But, you know, it's scary to think that you know, that sort of thing can happen. And like, you know, oh my gosh, like why would somebody need to write a bad check in a time during a pandemic where everybody is losing their jobs and everybody's running out of money and are trying to find, you know, food to eat? You know, he's a security guard, and I mean, does he deserve to die? Like, even if what he did was wrong, he did write a bad check. He should have been arrested. He should be held accountable for that eventually. But also, that's like Les Miserables. That's like putting a dude in jail for stealing a loaf of bread. Like, what the fuck? You know? And it's just that sort of thing. It's like, I don't understand how it could get there. I don't understand how it could get there in the first place unless this person did not care. And, you know, the whole thing is that when he's, and if you've watched the video, it's freaking sad. And I've only watched it once, and really like only pieces, because I couldn't stomach it. But he said, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. It's the same thing that, it's the same thing. They keep doing this. And if they didn't hear us the first time, then they're not going to hear us the second time. They're not going to hear us this time, you know, until we burn down a target. And it's just, it hurts. It hurts so much. So the big thing that I want to address is that everybody, and I've heard a lot of people in in our purple community, because again, like this video, it is, you know, it is very much generally about the terribleness, but, you know, I also need to address some people in our own community that, you know, they're like, well, you know, Prince would be sad. Prince wouldn't want this. Prince wouldn't want this to be happening. You know what? No shit. Nobody wants this to be happening. Nobody wants to be protesting. Nobody wants the destruction. Nobody wants any of this. It's happening for reasons out of our control. Nobody wants it. Wouldn't you? I mean, what we want is equality. What we want is justice. Nobody wants to go and burn down a building. I'm sure those people would be much happier at home, hanging out with their family and having fun with their friends without fearing for their lives every day. And it just hurts me that people would be trying to take something as huge as this and try and make it as if like, oh, Prince wouldn't like this. Let's use the name of Prince in a certain way. Well, Prince wouldn't want this. Nobody wants this. Don't come to me quoting the song Race, which was his one and only song where he kind of talked about like, hey, what if the concept of race didn't matter? You know, that's what that song was about. It wasn't that it doesn't matter. It was kind of a what if song. But if you're going to come quoting any of Prince, come quoting Dreamer, come quote Family Name, come quote Mars, come quote all of these songs that he wrote where he was like, hey, it really sucks the way that Prince is being, that Black people are being treated where I live. Because he's not even just talking, it's not even just, you know, America in general. Yeah, you know, America, yeah. He was talking about his own. That's what Prince talked about. Prince sang songs of what he knew. Or if he didn't know it, he would bring somebody in who knew. And then he would talk to them and he would get their input in order to make a good song. And the third thing that I've been hearing, and I really, really wish that people would stop, is I've heard so many people say, I hope that they don't touch, or they better not touch First Avenue. And to all of the people who are saying that, I'm just, fuck y'all. This isn't about us. It's not about Prince, okay? All of this that's happening right now. Yes, and Baltimore, thank you, Wind. What's happening right now, if they did burn down First Avenue, it would suck a lot because that place has a lot of sentimentality and nostalgia and meaning for us. But if burning down First Avenue is what it takes to get justice, then I bet even Prince would be okay with that. You know, that's the problem here, is that we're saying that, oh, we're scared. We're scared for a building. We're not scared for the lives of Black people. We're not scared for the lives of the protesters that are out there who are bringing attention to this matter. We're scared for building. Like, what the hell is that? That doesn't even make any sense. Like, again, it's, you know, I said earlier, I said, if you're scared, more scared about these businesses being burned down than you are about the death, then there's something wrong with you. And the same goes for any place that we would think, First Avenue and, you know, all those stuff. Like, I love going to those places. I don't want them to get burned down. But if that's the price of justice, then that's the price of justice. That's what I say. So, yeah. But I mean, but we had a slew of these. Like, you know, we said more body cams. We said more accountability. And, you know, even those were only for like the precincts who wanted to do it and agreed to do it. You know, nobody was forced to do it. There were no government mandates. There weren't any real oversight or accountability for these police stations. It was all if they wanted to. They did more sensitivity training, you know. But we've already heard, if you watch Trevor Noah, if you watch Hassan Minhaj, if you watch the guy who has the HBO show, and I can't remember his name, but he did like several episodes about police brutality and police power. And like, we know for a fact that police officers are trained to shoot first and ask questions later. They're trained that their lives are more important than any citizen. They're not trained correctly. So you can't throw in, well, we're going to make sure that, you know, once a year they get a sensitivity training. That's not going to go against the years and years of indoctrination of your life is more important than any criminal. Because of course, anybody is just a criminal. If the cops get called on them, they're immediately a criminal. That's what's happening. God damn it. I mean, there's just so many deaths of innocent Black people, tons of protests. It's all right up in your face. The body cams are wonderful. I actually loved that as an addition, but the cops have now just been turning them off. They just turn them off before they do bad shit. And the only times that we catch them is when they accidentally thought they were turning them off, but actually turned them on, and then they got caught doing stuff. So that's what ends up happening is, oh, I'm about to do some bad shit. Let me just turn it off real quick. So that's not even all that great. Then you have instances like George Floyd, where it's right there in video. You can't dispute it. There's no way that you can say that that was a right thing for that police officer to do. Then for you to not act upon it, I mean, again, you have to understand there's so many different factors that are going into this. There's the injustice. There's the fact that it was right in everybody's faces. Everybody is completely on edge because of COVID-19. Like, this is not happening in a vacuum, people. This is happening because there's a whole ton of factors for years and years and years. They're all boiling over at this point. Okay? So that's the problem here. You're not like, anybody who is like willfully not understanding what is happening, then there is something wrong with you. Okay? I mean, I love you because I'll always love everybody, because love for one another and all of that, because I firmly believe in that. But I also believe that there are times when love for one another, you have to use that even in times of stress. You have to use that even in times of violence. The protesters, I love them all. Okay? All the good cops out there, I love them all. You know, I love everybody who is not out there perpetrating injustice and oppression on people. So, I mean, but that's the problem, is that this is honestly just history repeating itself. The fact that Martin Luther King's quote is just as poignant today as it was back in the 60s, the 50s and the 60s, there's no reason for us to have not gotten any kind of progress. Like, you know, if you look at today, yeah, sure, there's less blatant racism. There's a whole lot less of it. And I would say that we as the Black community, we definitely have a lot more allies out there. The problem right now is that the people who are our allies are not the people who are in positions to make changes to that, right? Like, that's the problem here. Because I shared a bunch of stuff. I shared you don't have to be Black to be mad about what's going on right now. Most people are understanding that. I posted a million things. If you don't follow me on Facebook, feel free to send me a friend request. I'll add you, and you can see I've been posting stuff. I've been sharing lots of videos because I feel that this is just there needs to be somebody who's trying to spread the word. I've already heard from a few people from my Facebook that have said, "I thank you for sharing these. Thank you for sharing your thoughts because I never thought of it in this context." And I'm like, good. I'm glad that I'm like even shaking here just thinking about it. But if all I can do is come on here and I can rant for a while, and hopefully if it makes even one more person get it, then I think I've done my job. Oh my gosh, it just doesn't make any sense. So there's been a lot of stuff that's been happening under the radar. There's a huge spotlight on it right now, which is why they needed to make a more conscious and swift action. That's the only thing that would have stopped this in its tracks. Like I said, day one, it was like, oh, that thing happened. Day two, maybe somebody will do something. And it wasn't until the pocketbooks of businesses are disrupted, that's when people want to do something about it. And that's definitely, an issue, right? And I'm not even saying that there wasn't somebody out there who was just like, well, I don't think we're going to ever do anything. But you also needed to do something quicker. Jill Jones actually posted, I think this was day 1 or 2, and they said, do you want the protests to stop? Then arrest the officers involved. And you know what? They arrested one of the officers involved on Friday, like in the afternoon. But that's not enough. And you let it fester for too long. Like, all four officers need to be arrested and held accountable. They need to have big charges put on them. The main officer, the main one with his knee on the neck, he's being charged with 3rd-degree murder and manslaughter. And that's on the murder charge, I believe, like, legally, that's the biggest that he can get. It's never going to be 1st degree because it was not premeditated. There's at least no proof that it was premeditated. But if he's got 3rd, the other officers are probably going, I'm not a legal person, but they're probably going to be held accountable for manslaughter and stuff as well. That's a whole other thing. But, it's like, oh, and this was even like, see, I'm reading my notes right now. My notes are out of date because the first thing that happened is they fired them and they thought that was going to be good enough. And it was just like, oh, great, you fired them. Good. I guess justice is served because they lost their job for murdering somebody. Like, that, does that make any sense to anybody? But like, if you rebel and you burn down a Target and a Walgreens and a Domino's, again, so many of these company buildings are the ones that the news is trying to make you pay attention to. And also the news is like, oh, and the riots and the looters. It's just like, it's a rebellion. These are people who are fighting and they're trying to call attention to the injustice. And that's the problem. I mean, but like, you didn't care until you didn't feel safe, white people. That's basically what's happening, right? Because we feel unsafe every day. This is a common occurrence. And I've done videos on this where I've talked about this before. If you are Black in America, it's not the same. It's just not the same. You're going to end up being pulled over. You're going to have, people who are racist. And I'm not even saying like, they're not going to come up and call you a nigga, but they're going to be like, this person has darker skin than mine, so I need to be careful. Like, That's the problem here, is that people think that racism is straight up lynching, straight up using the N-word. Like, that's not what it is. That is racism, obviously, but that's not really how racism exists today, except for like in small pockets across the nation. Most racism is inadvertent. It's under the radar. It's, to use a term that I don't normally use, but microaggressions. It's like, a lot of it is like, if you're walking down the street and you're walking up to, a black person and you cross the street to avoid them, that's fucking racism. I'm sorry. That's racism, and you need to identify that. And what I've also seen is, like I said, like with the Central Park thing, like that lady is like a Hillary supporter, probably left wing, probably voted for Obama, was wearing a mask, was practicing social distancing, was doing all of like the left wing sort of things. But when the chips were down, her racist programming came out, and she used that as a weapon. And that's the problem. That's the problem. And it can only go on for so long before there is some sort of reaction. So, of course, moving on to the next part of this, the protests are still going on, and the protests are going now across the nation. I think I just saw somebody comment that now there's protests in the UK. Good. There needs to be protests everywhere about what's happening and the inequality that's going on. But of course, the president is now saying, well, I'm going to send in the National Guard and the military. Now, he couldn't do the military. You can't actually technically use the military on like domestic soil, like military is for going other places, but National Guard is basically, I think the same thing. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but he sent the National Guard, and they're closing off parts of the city. And even the governor was like, we're going to put force on the protests, and it's to instill peace so that we can start beginning the talks about how to address the inequality. And that statement from the governor was before they had arrested him, before they charged him, before they did all this stuff. So here's the problem with that. If the protests stop, then it's time to talk. And if you don't do what you say you're going to do and really try to deliver real justice, and I don't even see how you can. Like, it's not going to be like a switch that can be flipped. It's going to be generations of people. And I'm not really paying that much attention to the chat box. I know some people who are using profanity are being blocked. So just, hey, like, don't use a bunch of profanity and you probably won't get blocked. It's going to take, 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, it's already taken, what is it, like 60 or 70 years just to get from that MLK quote to today, and we're still not that far from it. So it's kind of crazy. It's just, I just don't understand. I just don't understand. I just don't understand where the mentality comes. And it might just be that, as a lot of other people, we buy into what Prince says. We say love for one another. We treat everybody equally. We try to love everybody. That is what we do. And the idea that everybody doesn't live their life that way is just scary. It's scary to think that. I don't know. I don't even know. They arrested and charged one of the officers. They need to do the other three. The police need to be held to a higher standard. And right now, that is not happening. Okay? The police are being held to a lower standard. We give them authority. We give them a badge and a gun. We give them so much power. And they need to treat that power with respect. They can't They can't have the cops going out there and murdering people, and because they're cops, they don't have to pay for that. It should be that if they do something bad, then they're held to a higher standard. They're arrested more. They're hurt. You know, they are thrown in jail faster. They are brought up on charges faster. It can't be that a cop does something wrong and then the other cops protect that person. There's a phrase called "the bad apple will spoil the bunch," right? That's the problem here. This is a rotten apple spoils the bunch. Is that saying that all the apples are bad? No, but that is saying that if you have one bad apple, it's going to make the rest of them bad by just because they're in close proximity, right? So if a good cop is protecting a bad cop, is that cop still good? I don't know. My gut reaction would be no, they're not. Because I mean that just makes sense to me, and maybe it doesn't make sense to everybody. But if you are protecting somebody who has committed a crime, and you are protecting somebody who has done something wrong, you know, like murdering a civilian, then yeah, that's not right. That's not right. So I mean, that's basically where I'm at with it. I don't know. You know, a lot of people have issue with the phrase Black Lives Matter because they think that somebody is saying only Black Lives Matter or Black Lives Matter more than everybody else's. But no, the retort of all lives matter is definitely the wrong one. So just so you know, but the Black Lives Matter mean Black Lives Matter too, and the reason for that is because it has already been well established that white lives matter. But all lives don't matter until Black Lives Matter. So anybody who was thinking that Black Lives Matter meant something else, I just broke it down for you. There's no reason why you should be thinking that it means anything other than what it actually means unless you are being willfully ignorant. You are willfully not wanting to know. And anybody who is in the comments, I've seen a few who are like, rioting is wrong and they should be arrested. You know, Black Lives Matter is a hate group. Sure, go ahead. Feel free to unfollow my channel. You don't, you know what? That's the whole thing is, again, to call Black Lives Matter a hate group because they are protesting the unjust death of Black people at the hands of police. You know, if that's your problem is, you know, I don't know, that's just wrong. It's just wrong. Yeah, I don't even know how to respond to that. I mean, I guess what we can do is we can change the slogan to Target matters, Domino's pizzas matter, because that's what's actually happening. You know, burning down a Target is, you know, what's getting all you white people's attention. So we should just call it Domino's pizzas matter, Walgreens matter, because that's what gets your attention. If we say Black Lives Matter, then people want to argue with you and they want to say that color doesn't matter and race isn't a factor in anything. Sure, okay, yeah, sure, but targets matter. Targets matter. Yeah. I don't understand how anybody could take that stance and still say that they believe anything that Prince talked about. So I'll just say that. Now I'm going to go ahead and use Prince in that way. The way that I just said everybody else is doing, I'm going to use it. If you don't care about the lives of Black people, then you should just stop talking. You should stop listening to Prince right now. I mean, honestly. Prince had so many songs about what it was like to be Black and the injustice and everything. And you can't ignore that. It just doesn't make any sense. So yeah. I think that's what I wanted to say. You know, this is either going to get me tons of unsubscribes, or, you know, I don't understand. But again, if you want to stop following me, if you don't, like my vibe or whatever, I'm completely okay with that. For me, I would rather have this community be one that, yes, we all love Prince's music, but we kind of all need to be on the same page as well when it comes to, let's see, how can I say this? How can racial equality? Color blindness doesn't count. Color blindness isn't the thing. Okay, like nobody cares about that. So, I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I'm gonna get off. How long have I been ranting for? It's like been 40 minutes. I think that's more than enough. But it's been good to actually kind of get this off my chest. And like I said, I wanted to address this not only just in a general stance, but I needed to address my community that I feel so close to. I feel like we are, really, we should be in sync. And if we're not, I mean, that is what it is. I don't know. I don't really even know what to say. Thank you everybody for being here and being a place where I can come and I can rant and I can talk about things that, really matter. Because, we have a lot of fun around here. I try to keep it light. I don't like to come on and rant and go crazy and be angry. That's not what I do. That's not what I do. I try to keep it, happy. And I am gonna stop because I'm gonna I'm starting to come to some tears. I just want everybody to show love to everybody. And if we can do that, that would be great. And that's not a call for anger. That's not a call for violence. That's not a call. I mean, I'm seeing some people who are like, this person needs to be hanged. This person needs to be shot. That, like, no, that's what got us here in the first place. We don't need any more death. Let's not hurt anybody else. But what we do need to do is we need to start tearing down these systems of oppression. And don't think that your neck of the woods doesn't have any. Don't think that this isn't happening around you, because I assure you that it is. It's happening everywhere. Everybody should be angry about this. So I put a link in the description if you want to help. It's called the Minneapolis Freedom Fund. And if I come up with any other links, I'll put those in the description as well. And but it's the Minneapolis Freedom Fund, and it's to help with posting bail for protesters. There are those. There's a couple of other ones that are like, will help pay for cleanup and stuff like that. You need to leave this room now, please.
I want to give you a hug.
You want to come give me a hug?
Yeah.
Thank you. So, if you want to help the people who are out there protesting, that's where you need to go. There, like I said, there's a link in the description. I'm seeing a lot of people talking about everybody's angry. The problem here is you need to understand, what is it that you're angry about? If you're angry that there's a rebellion going on, then you're angry for the wrong reasons. You should be angry that a man is dead and there are several others who are being killed right under our noses that weren't so blatant, that everybody didn't see on TV and on the news. Hopefully, I already see people in the comments and in the chat you are literally being willfully ignorant. Because I'm laying it all out there. Oh, that's a very good point. RL. I'm gonna say on that note real quick right before I leave. The quote was, what is that? What was that? The quote was, protesters that burnt down their own community. Okay. So here's a problem with the way that people think about this, all right? Most people don't own the place where they live. They rent a small apartment in a building in a city that hates them, that oppresses them. When you say we're burning down our own communities, are we? Because again, what I saw being burned down were large corporate buildings, government buildings. That's what I saw happening. They're not going and targeting small businesses. They're not targeting people's homes. They're targeting places that will hurt financially and get the attention. So the entire idea of trying to label these rebels is what they are, protesters, labeling them as somebody who is hurting their community. Their community is, think about what a community is to you. Is a community a place where you could be run down by the police and shot and killed and nobody cares? Is that a community to you? Because maybe you live in a different type of community than these people do. And maybe you need to take a step back and think larger than your own perspective. And that's not just to you. And I know that I was calling you out, RL. That's to anybody who would agree with that sentiment. That the rioters and the looters, that's what you guys call them, not the rebels, not the people trying to fight for injustice. You'll of course obviously call them by the worst possible names because that's what the news is calling them. I don't even have anything else to say. I don't even know what else I can say. Because again, if people aren't going to get it, then they're just not going to get it. And that just means that they're not really allies and that they're not really trying to understand what it's like to live as a Black person. And again, if you're going to be willfully ignorant about it, I don't really know what to say. So target lives matter. AutoZone lives matter is essentially what happens to some of these people, because they care more about a business being burned down than somebody's life. That's the problem. So anyway, I love all of you. I'm sorry. This has gone on for much too long. I even went on like an additional like 8 minutes longer than I meant to. But there's just so much to be said, and I'm sure I haven't said it all. And I don't even know if I'm the right spokesperson for this sort of thing. I only know what I know. I don't know what I don't know. There's a whole lot of people who are obviously much more in line with knowing how to speak about this eloquently. What I will say is Scott Woods, follow him. Chloe Calvin, follow her. I've been looking at a lot of their posts. They speak so good. They speak so well. So yeah, anyway, love you all. May you live to see the dawn. Hopefully this whole nation will. See you later.